Well, good morning. We are meeting after a long while. And today I am going to talk about film studies. And if you remember the unit of the syllabus that has been assigned to me is adaptation. Adaptation, appropriation. Now, before we start the discussion of film adaptation, I don't know whether anybody has actually introduced film studies as a field or as a discipline. Has anyone other than myself, has anyone started this? SB, SS or Vivek?
No, sir.
In that case, I think I must tell you something about film studies. Now, today I want your response to film studies. What is film studies and why is film studies? Why is film studies so important? Why should you study films? We all know that films are there to be enjoyed. You go there, you go to a film theater, a multiplex, and you enjoy with popcorn, with Pepsi or Coca-Cola, you enjoy films. Then why should you study films? And today, because of Netflix, because of Pop TV, because of so many other channels, you can access films at your own drawing room. So why should you study films? Can anyone give me an answer to this question? Why should you study films? Anyone? And I insist on an answer being given. Okay, Disha Sharnal, what is a film study? What is film studies? And why is film studies important?
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Sir, I can't really explain what film study really is about, but the only thing I can say is that we really need to have a study like film studies to explore or to compare the relation between to compare the relation or to explore the world around us. Um, uh, have,
Okay, go on.
To compare how much
No.
how
Okay. May I just butt in here? Okay. You say that you don't know what film studies is all about.
yes, sir.
Film studies is a systematic study of films. How they are made, where from are they made, why they are made, for whom they are made, who consume it, and how. And why are certain films called classics and other films called flops? Is it only the amount of money it makes, the box office, or has it got something else to do with it? Is there something else? So this is why you study. This is what film studies is as an academic discipline. This is what film studies is. Now, why should you study films? Why is film studies important? You say that film studies is important in order to explore the relationship between us and the world. Is there anyone else? Is Shayan Pariyal here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, tell me, why is film studies important? Why should you study films?
Sir, just like the literary text, I think film can also be treated as a text. So, and the films are none but the representation of the society. So, if you want to explore society, if you want to know about life, about different things that is happening in the society, in the particular society, then I think it's important to read the films. So that's why I think film studies are very important.
So Shayan seems to think that films should be studied because they give you many ideas about society, emotions, about humor, about pathos, about anger, about action, and so on and so forth. So love and revenge, patriotism and treason, all these things are discussed in films. And they need to be studied because film has become an integral part of modern life. From the 20th century onwards, even today in the 21st century, films have become really integral to us. The glamour, the controversy, the serious bucks, and the crimes all are associated with films. Okay. Now, I must come to the topic that I am paid to teach you. I have been assigned this unit on film adaptation and appropriation. Now, what is adaptation? When you make use of something for a different reason, when you make use of something in a different context, when you make use of something from a different perspective, when you make use of something for a different purpose, this is called adaptation. So first thing that we have to understand while talking about adaptation is the fact that there has to be a belief that nothing is unchanging or unchangeable. So there is nothing sacrosanct or standard that cannot be changed. This understanding and this process of understanding may be called abrogation. Abrogation is a kind of a mode of denial that something is sacrosanct or standard that cannot be touched or changed. And then there is something called appropriation. What is appropriation? So if you understand that something is not sacrosanct or standard, something is amenable to be changed and used for different reasons, for a different purpose, then you can use it in your own way. In your own way. And that is called appropriation. You think about Robinson Crusoe. This was basically a literary adaptation of a real life story. The story of Alexander Selkirk or Alexander Selkirk. The name is given in two ways, Alexander Selkirk or Alexander Selkirk, a marooned castaway, someone who was shipwrecked on an uninhabited island. And then he was rescued after a long stay in this uninhabited island. So it was a story of adventure, and it was also a story of human survival. How man can make use of things. How can man can survive by making use of things that he gets for what he needs. So this is what ultimately led to the popularity of Robinson Crusoe in such a way. And we all know that Robinson Crusoe gave birth to countless adaptations. A text like pantomime that you are studying, a text like Crusoe in England by Elizabeth Bishop, a text such as Foe by James Coetzee. All these things have been adapted, changed from the original story of human adventure and survival. So obviously you can say that the source text was Robinson Crusoe's adventures as depicted by Daniel Defoe. Okay, so you think about it. There is a picture of an enchanted castle. One of the casements of the castle is open and is showing a stormy sea. And this led to the writing of Keats's famous poem, Ode to a Nightingale. So sometimes it so happens that from one medium, from one art form, we tend to graduate to another art form. From painting to literature, from literature to painting, from literature to films, and so on and so forth. But we have to understand certain very important aspects of this change of media. This transference. Why is it so important? Because every medium has got its own character. Every medium has got its own character and its own characteristics or features. Every medium has got its own target audience. And every medium has to have different ways of communicating the message that it wants to communicate. Why is it so important? Because you know, if you read a story, any story, we all know that there was a strong controversy between Chetan Bhagat and the clan of Amir Khan when Three Idiots was published. Chetan Bhagat said that 5 point someone is the source of this particular film. And this was vehemently denied by the Amir Khan camp. Okay. We all know about Shashank Redemption. This was a novella, a very long short story written by Stephen King. And it led to the creation of arguably one of the best films of all time. If you have to believe in IMDb, it is the best film of all times, even till today. So Shashank Redemption, the story, and Shashank Redemption and the film. Saptapadi, the story, and Saptapadi, the film. These are not similar. These have their differences. The guide, the text, the novel by R.K. Narayan, and guide, the film starring Devanand. These are entirely different stories. Even though at bottom the source is the same. So obviously, when you think about the question of adaptation, we have to understand that there is a problem. There is a problem of intertextuality that is fundamental to the field. What is the source text? What is the source text? What is the target text? And what are the intermediary texts? For example, when we see Ogamodhu Sundari, we are reminded of My Fair Lady. If I'm a film buff and if I'm not a literature student, I may not have ever heard about Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw. So which one is the source text? Is George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion the source text of Ogamodhu Sundari? Or is it My Fair Lady, the film version of that particular text, that is Pygmalion, the source text for Ogamodhu Sundari? So obviously, one thing I have to understand at the outset. What is that? Film is an audio-visual medium. At one time, it was basically a visual medium because these were silent films. Only pictures were shown. And they say a picture is worth 10,000 words. And even then, they needed stories. Why did they need stories? Because in order to grasp the attention, in order to take hold of the attention of the audience, the spectators, a story interest was imperative. Now this story interest was sustained by literary works. Why? Because they provided very tempting, very popular, very well established and well liked textual pools from which to choose the story of the films. You think about Pather Pachali. This is considered to be a classic of Satyajit Ray's. This was basically a film adaptation of the story by Vibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay. Similar is the case with, say, Chander Pahar. And you will understand that adaptation means that texts are taken from one medium to another and used and usurped in keeping with the needs and demands, the ideological positions, and the intended message of the filmmaker. Understood? So this is basically the root of film adaptation. Films were becoming important. Films could give immediacy to the stories. Films found in literature a very, very fertile field, a rich mine from which to take up stories. But when we talk about the idea of film adaptation, we must think about film adaptation as a loose field. It's quite loose. Why? Because where from are you taking up the stories? Are you taking up stories from one source, or you are mixing and matching? It often seems and shows that we often take up things from different sources. We are eclectic. We choose from different sources. And in so doing, we often add things that are conducive to the interest of the particular medium into which the process of adaptation is being made. So if it is a film that is the intended target of this process of adaptation, and if it is literature that is the intended source of the process of adaptation, then obviously the demands of the film media as an audiovisual media, which people go to watch. You go to watch movies. And because you go to watch movies and it is not for free, you have to pay money in order to get into the multiplexes, or in order to get into the film theaters, film halls. So obviously, changes are made. And sometimes changes are made necessary. They are necessitated by changes in culture, changes in society, changes in science and technology. You think about Mumbai or Bombay, made by Sandeep Roy. It was taken from a story, a Feluda story by Satyajit Roy. And when this was written, mobile phones were not there. But if you go to see this movie, watch it, and you will see that Feluda, Tokshe, Ralmohan Babu, all of them, and Mr. Gore, they are all using mobile phones, because by the time that the film was made, where telephones were almost a thing of the past. And their place had been taken by cell phones. So in order to make communication, you cannot make use of this thing, wire telephones. This will not sell properly. This will not sell well. Similarly, you think about it. Suppose you are trying to adapt a story, say in the 19th century, late 19th century, or an early 20th century story. And there is reference to telegram. Say Pother Dabi. If it is a period piece, you can even today play act at sending telegram. But if you really want to adapt it to the needs and demands, to the tastes of a 21st century audience, then you will have to make use of, in place of telegram, you have to make use of SMS or WhatsApp. So, along with changes in time, changes are made and changes are detected in society. But if it is an entirely different ball game, if it is an intercultural transference, say comedy of error being made into Bhranti Vilas, then the change is not only from theater to film. The change is not only from one time to another. It is also a change from one medium to another. So obviously, whatever works for the source text may or may not work for the target text. And whatever works for the target text may not have worked for the source text. So what I really want to point out today is the fact that film adaptation is often a challenging field of study because it not only involves metamorphosis of one text from one medium to another. It can also mean the bringing on board or taking on board elements from other texts as well. Now I come to another particular very simple thing that is called remake. Is remake an adaptation? In a loose sense, it is. In a loose sense, it is an adaptation. But basically, for remakes, we will see that in more often than not, remakes are associated with or motivated by mercenary considerations. Dawn was a very successful film for Amitabh Bachchan. So, Dawn had to be adapted by Shah Rukh Khan. Ogumadu Sundari was a very interesting and well-liked film from 1981. So it has to be remade by someone in 2011, making certain changes, but basically trying to eat into the pie of the earlier text, earlier movie. So there is a basic difference between film adaptation and film remake. Remakes are also some kind of adaptation, but the motive is different. Okay, Ogumadu Sundari starring your Srilekha Mitro and your this fellow Babul Supriyo. It is totally different from My Fair Lady. It is also totally different from Ogumadu Sundari starring your this thing, Uttam Kumar, Vikas Rai and others. So there is a difference. And this difference you have to understand. Okay. So today I have tried to introduce the field of studies called film adaptation. And why is it an interesting film, an area of film studies? It is interesting because it shows the changes in society, the changes in culture, changes in technology, changes in taste, changes in the demands of the Gulivali Janta, Janardhan, or the target audience. I will take a couple of more classes on this. I will give a couple of more lectures on film adaptation.